Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas and in Wide Angle with Ashok Vyas. Today, I am delighted to be welcoming someone who has come all the way from Jaipur, not just to be a part of this show, but he has other areas that are drawing his attention. But what is interesting about this gentleman, whose name is Avinash Kalla, is one, he is a prolific writer, traveler, as well as political analyst, and is founder of an important annual event called Talk Journalism. Before I go to him, journalism means different things to different people based on where they are sitting on the periphery. Let me elaborate why I say that. Nowadays, it is not the core idea of informing and educating people. It is not the core idea of sharing a balanced viewpoint. The idea is that the media house with which they are associated, how that media house is going to make more money. Does Avinash Kalla agree with that? And then I have other areas which pertains to the way you see role media is playing these days in India. So Avinashji, welcome. Namaste.
Namaskar, Ashokji. Nice to be here.
So with that introduction about role of media, let me seek your views once again on how do you see, and I'm kind of drawn to draw a comparison here. Earlier we used to say that medical doctor is a very noble profession. Now definition might have changed slightly here and there, but the same is true for journalists.
Well, Ashokji, what you are saying is a widely popular perception, but I still believe journalism is speaking truths to power. We are the torchbearers who ask difficult questions that are important to people, and we ask them to the people who have been entrusted the responsibility to do that job. So for me, journalism is still speaking truths to power. And what you are saying is also true, that the way the business model of media is shaping up, a lot depends on how your media house is taking a stand on a certain issue. That's a worldwide phenomenon. But because of the growing digital age, one thing has become very important is that there are independent, smaller houses which are airing free and fair views out. And media is always reporting. Now, even like what you said, that how the media owners are, similarly, there are a different set of audiences. So if there is a dedicated, loyal audience of Wide Angle with Ashok Vyas, they would not watch a Wide Angle with Avinash Kalla if that comes out to be true, and vice versa. So media, I think, is still doing its job. Yes, commercials have dented it a bit, and the propaganda machine has given it out to a larger audience. What I see back home in India is no different from what I've been seeing in the US for the last 5-6 days that I've been traveling and observing.
See, we always hear that India and America are similar to each other in terms of both are great democracies, but now both have great churning machine of fake news media also, as is the very favorite line of President of America. When I say fake news, let me take that away from the table for now, and let us talk about the way you see role media is playing these days. And when I say like this, I mean, I seem to be having a kind of a grudge or a tinge of complaint there, which I do not have the right to, because I'm also part of the media. But having said that, I think objective approach is probably very difficult to find. Do you agree, disagree?
Well, this has always been the case that media does take sides. It's not a phenomenon happening today. And what I see here is the president openly coming out and saying fake news at every drop of the hat. Any news which is not aligning with him is fake news. And that is not just President Trump's problem. I think world over there is a problem like that. And at least I should say, and I spoke to somebody just a few minutes back, and I said, I need to give it to President Trump for at least allowing every media to come into the White House and pose questions to him, even if he likes it or not, or he dismisses it as fake news, because back home we don't have that luxury. So I would say that media still is robust and is asking questions in different ways and formats, and in different countries they do get a reply or not. While in the US, if you look at it, there is a Washington Post and a New York Times and a CNN, which would give a news of a certain kind, and on the other side you would have Steve Bannon and his YouTube machinery, or a Fox News, or a New York Post, or a different kind of a thing. So there are loyalties which are divided, and that diversity has been there always and is still around. So now I think more than blaming the media, it is on how the audiences picks and choose what they want to listen.
So audience now has even more responsibility. As in democracy, it is ultimately you and the kind of ruler that you get is again your responsibility. Same in media now.
Yeah, it's your responsibility. See, what is one thing good, Ashokji, now is that there is democratization of media space. If you take it 20 years back when you came here or you started out into the business, there would have been very limited spaces that people could read or access. And only a reporter or a scribe or a newspaper person would have that information. So the editors used to live in an ivory tower that I have the information, will disseminate. But digital coming in and new media coming out, that supremacy has been broken. There is an information overflow out there. So it's for the readers, for he or she to go out and choose and pick what they want to listen.
Okay, so what you say is very interesting. Now, the new landscape that we have, so media has to compete with tweets. In fact, many times it is the tweet that results into making of news.
Yes, it's a great opinion making tool, like it or not. See, look at it. Be it any head of state, they first break the news on Twitter and then they go out to the press. In our part of the country, the only way to listen from the Prime Minister's tweets. So I think there is a democratization of.
Also, allow me to add, because I so-called a supporter of Modi ji's policies in some way, I would say that in addition to tweets, you also have him giving a lot of live broadcast speeches at different places.
Well, he's a monologue person.
Yeah,
it's always his Man Ki Baat, never the people's Man Ki Baat.
No, in his Man Ki Baat also he has people's Man Ki Baat.
No, I don't think so.
No, see, if you
when was a harsh comment added in that thing? See, media by definition is going to oppose the ruling party, and the ruling party should be thick-skinned enough to take that criticism on. You know, Pandit Nehru allowed opposition to put questions onto him, and when Vajpayee took him to cleaners, he called Vajpayee for a tea and wrote a very nice letter to the then party president saying, "You got a very young good lad coming in." And Vajpayee reciprocated the same when he didn't find Nehruji's picture in Southall. So that decency in the political space has broken. Now our politicians have become very thin-skinned. Media was always barking out loud against the government. We are bound to be doing that. That's our job.
See, barking word may
no, I'm saying barking
multiple
loud.
layers. No, barking loud may have multiple layers. So I would not.
Well, let's use a politically
I would not
correct word that they were voicing their opinions to the high and mighty.
Let us stick to barking.
All right.
So no, just to make a point. See, what happens is, as they said, there's a constructive criticism or there's criticism for the sake of criticism. But let me not get there, and I'll take my role back to asking questions to you and not as a Modi supporter. But I think the point government of India should take, that people have this need to get a feel that there is a accountability on the part of the ruling leaders, that they would be subjected to certain questions, and which I believe they are, but they are not as openly accepting.
Leave media aside, sir. In our parliament, how many questions has the Prime Minister taken on board straight on? Not many.
Not many is
no.
Right,
he always comes out with his own set of things, delivers and out. So we see the problem is
now since you brought it up, then you have to also see that how many times the opposition is actually sitting and listening to the content of whatever the bill is being presented, etc. So it will be another issue.
It's an onus on both the parties, and I would say the current opposition has learned it from the erstwhile opposition as to disrupting the house is the best way to go around. So if you look at those who are sitting on the treasury benches today, they would do the same. So, you know, I'm quoting Prime Minister Vajpayee again. You know, call me an old romantic of the 90s or whatever. But if you read Sanjay Baru's book 1991, that is a very interesting example that he gives, that Prime Minister, now former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was the then finance minister. and he was all set to open the economy up, and Vajpayee took him to cleaners. So he was rattled, and he goes to Narasimha Rao and puts in his paper and says, I can't do this. I'm trying to build and help the government, and this is how I'm being targeted. I'm leaving. So Narasimha Rao takes the paper. Manmohan goes back and he dials Vajpayee and says, listen, what are you doing? My finance ministry is being rattled. So Vajpayee ji rings up Manmohan Singh and says, Sardarji, whatever you are doing is right for the country, but opposing you is my Raj Dharma. I will oppose you tooth and nail, even harsher tomorrow, but you keep doing the good work. So the problem which has now happened in the last 10, 15 years.
So let me take it from you right here. So this was Vajpayee in opposition, and he had that much graciousness or openness to call and connect with the Sardarji at that time, finance minister Saab. But now I don't see opposition.
So I'll again, you've taken this sentence halfway. There was a Narasimha Rao who rang up Vajpayee and said, listen, this is what is happening. Our problem is that we have become so egoistic in the political spheres that personal camaraderie has gone for a toss. You know, the last breed of camaraderie leaders has ironically gone upstairs in heavens to the Lord. You know, the good example was Sushma Swaraj was a very great, very well connected, respected leader. Arun Jaitley was a great operator in that sense of the world. Now the ones are left is only Nitin Gadkari, I think, who has got a great equation across the board. So I think it's about time that our politicians also, in their hindsight,
so very smartly from media we moved toward politicians. It just happened.
We can't keep the two away
because we cannot take media away from politicians.
And you can't take politics away from media.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the media politics now.
Oh,
when I say media politics, there is polarization.
It's even murkier. Leave it. I think the other two are cleaner to discuss.
Okay, we will keep it without getting to the specifics. In terms of the impact that it has on people, in terms of forming their opinion, it is a very confused environment. When I say confused environment, meaning you hear, let's say, I'm just saying, Avinash say about an issue, something, and you hear Ashok say something about the same issue, and you will see that are they living in the same world? That is the kind of place we are in. So it boils down to, as you earlier said, you have to make your intelligent choice as to where you take. But now, as I was mentioning about tweets, let's talk about YouTube, and there are many YouTube channels in America as well as in India which are very, very popular, and they are also opinion makers in their own way.
Absolutely.
And they have no control. So many times you hear them come out with allegations without any substance, but they keep on doing it for n number of weeks, etc.
They are part of a strategy. They are a part of a strategy.
Yeah.
And many of them are independent voices. Like if you look at the US example, there is a gentleman that I follow on Twitter to hear from the right of the spectrum is Don Bongino. You know, he's a former cop and he comes out with this podcast, completely different view. And just listen to a person from the left, he will have a complete different view. So whenever somebody asks me a question, where do I get a balanced view? I said, on any topic, listen to the two ends of spectrum and you will get your own path, use your own judgment.
So I vaguely remember a definition of who is intelligent, and I don't know who said it, but he says that your ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. That is, so you have to be intelligent, and I think the gentleman sitting with me is very intelligent in terms of his ability to work with people with totally opposing views as journalists. So let us talk a little bit about your own journalistic experiences, and if I bring back the experience where you were on the road covering elections, you traveled almost many distant rural parts also of Rajasthan. Keeping that in your mind, when you are here now, we are just few weeks away from presidential election. Just think about the election feel of two places.
See, I'll tell you, it's great that you brought that up. I traveled close to 5,600 kilometers in Rajasthan in the election year. I did it a little before elections, maybe roughly around 11 months before the election, just to get a perception of people's thing. And why I came to the US here was again on the same idea that back home in India, I would only listen to a CNN because that is what is easily available. Maybe read a post on New York Times or whatever. Fox, I didn't get. Or when our local journalists would come in, they would land in New York, they would land in DC, they would have a set number of people to talk to, and they would go back. And that's my opinion. I said, America is beyond your DC, Vegas, and New York. There is a Wyoming, there is a Wisconsin, there is a Houston. You need to go out and talk to a common American. As the world's oldest democracy grapples with the biggest pandemic and a situation at a time where it is polarizing, what does a common American think about elections? So I said, if I could do that in Rajasthan, why can't I do it in the US? And that brought me here. And again, I'll say, it's when I'm here, I'm reaching out to both ends, or even of a third party.
Okay, so here is an interesting side for me now to learn from you. So far, I don't know how many days have you been here, but you have traveled quite a bit already.
Not quite a bit. I've just done DC, Philadelphia, and I'm here in Jersey and landed in New York straight into your studio.
Yeah.
So I'll go out and again dish for people.
Yeah. But so far, wherever you got a chance to talk to people, hear them out about their views, etc., how do you see in terms of people's genuine excitement about
None.
participating?
None.
Yeah.
None. If you are used to, you've been in India, you've covered election, land into any place where elections are about to happen 4 to 5 months in advance, and you will see a mood and a frenzy. When you come to a place like the US, it is very subdued.
Would you say this is all because of COVID or more?
I don't know. I haven't come here before COVID, but I think by and large the trend has been that people here are very silent. The gatherings are small. People don't endorse their views as much. They keep silent.
No, I think I would disagree partly. I see that a major role is being played by the impact of COVID.
Maybe, but what I have been gathering is the Zoom calls and the WhatsApp ecosystem is way too active. I've also figured out late yesterday evening that a new form of a rich SMS services are also being used, where an SMS can be used as a tool to reach out people who are not on WhatsApp or any other platform. So technology is going to shape this election in a very, very different way. And that is what makes it much more exciting, makes it much more interesting on the kind of content that will be developed, the back-end teams that are there. And interesting, I'm very keen to see the role of NRIs, because just before the pandemic situation happened, President Trump came to Ahmedabad and there was a huge Namaste Trump rally.
Correct.
In a very difficult time, which could be debated. So, and if I gather it right, in the last election, Trump could barely manage 20% of the Indian diaspora votes. So he needs the larger thing. And with these elections, you now see, earlier you used to have spokespersons, star campaigners and endorsers from within your country. Now I think elections have become cosmopolitan, where our Prime Minister carries an aura, or is perceived to be carrying an aura, that he could inflict a vote change, which is something which is very interesting to feel and look about.
Now, first
and I'm very keen to see how it happens in the US.
So whether it actually is happening or not, I don't know. But now, because you were earlier criticizing Prime Minister Modi on his not being accessible to journalists,
but he's always accessible to votes. He's always accessible to voters and votes.
That's good. I would say that is quality. But looking at it in terms of his potential impact on the global scene, as an Indian, do you feel that's a strength? I mean, we are not talking about the ethical part of it from the country,
about ethical,
but just an Indian side.
See, when I'm traveling outside, he's my Prime Minister. And then even in the country, he's my Prime Minister. We have all the rights to criticize him. That's perfectly all right. But no denying the fact that people connect with him more, because he makes more attempt to reach out to them. It's not that our former Prime Ministers haven't got a great reception in this part of the world. They've always got that, because India is a great, huge market. But this man is master of communication and master of ceremonies, He's one guy who could give Branson a run for his money, and I'm very proud about it. At least we have one ambassador or mascot. So I think he has pumped that up. He has hyped that level up. How much we have achieved on ground or in our balance sheets can always be debated. But be assured that Modi walks in his TRPs. He will create an aura or an atmosphere that, listen, I'm doing something big, larger than world, which is good, At times that helps you. But I don't feel bad about it at all,
I'm bringing it back to the open space of media. And I see the current phase as a churning period. and something good will come out of it.
I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, and in order to reach there faster, what do you think can be consciously done? Being a founder of annual event talk journalism, having interacted with journalists across the aisle, not just Indian journalists, but and you studied in UK also. So talk to me about any idea that you can have for media houses, for journalists. Whether they listen to you or not is a different question, but yeah.
No, I would always say that go after any and every such information that nobody wants to be published. Be it Trump or Biden, doesn't matter. Everybody has got skeletons in their cupboards. Bring out as many skeletons so that on the 3rd, when people go out to vote, at least they are better informed. So if they know that the taxes have been an issue, they should also know that Hunter Biden had an issue. So bring both out. Don't be selective, and that is only what media could do. And I'll tell you, there is a great perception that media knows it or gets it right. Tell me who in media predicted Hillary losing? Nobody. Nobody. But Hillary lost. So it also shows that there is a lot of disconnect between the media and the masses.
That is true for India as well as America.
Same, everywhere across the globe. Nobody predicted what happened in India twice.
What is the reason? Why this disconnect?
Because they don't move out of the studios. How many people have actually gone down the road?
They find everything on Google now, so they just follow that.
But Google doesn't vote.
That's true. That is true.
Google doesn't vote. It's people like you and me go out and vote. So
okay, so probably the last question before I appreciate you, that it has been such a pleasure interacting with you, and both of us tried to be a little bit open.
Okay, I hope I gave the last answer right.
He was open. But this question is more towards the positive side. You were very clear in saying that whatever skeletons you find, you bring them out. But now let us look at positive that is happening in the world. Do you see that also as a role of media to convey, to share, to inform, and to get to analytical understanding of that which is potentially good? That is
we do that once in a while. We do that once in a while. If there is a great human triumph story, it would be appreciated and given it out. But by definition, that is not our role. Goodness will come out and see, yeah, once in a while, that is okay. I'm
so happy today to hear that we can end on a note that we agree to disagree. Because I think
in all our 3 conversations we have agreed to disagree mostly.
No, personally, I think that if the positive just remains hidden and media considers their role only to bring out that which is contrary to what
I think that is
Gandhi
their primary role. Positivity and PR can always be done, and it can always.
See, PR word takes away the
positivity. It's fair enough. If somebody has done some good work, give it a space. If there is a good humanitarian story, like I was reading one story of a lady on wheelchair in Humans of New York, and she has done a great work on COVID. She used to be a dancer here and gone through a lot and still resilient and smiling and doing great work. Great human story. Humans of New York did it on Instagram. Some papers might have picked it up. But that is not what is concerning everyone. Yes, that gives you a smile in these difficult times to move on.
Okay, when you say what is concerning everyone, it again has its own debate of different
give me a story which was somebody who survived COVID and came out. I'll be happy and say, I too can do that. So that's perfectly all right once in a while. Not always.
See, there would be
if everything good is there in the world, then why do we need others to be around?
Okay, so because that's why we are different. I consider that as a role of media also to present that in an interesting manner, so that also becomes something about which people pay attention. And I understand the very old definition of news was that if a man, what was that line? If a man bites a dog, that becomes a news. If a dog bites a man, that is not a news. Something like that. So I understand that shock value, or which then goes towards sensationalism. So that has its own place. But anyway, concluding remarks. 30 seconds.
Well, it's been an exciting time here, and I hope that the next 30 days would be adventurous for me. I'll keep posting and sharing with you whatever little I learn. But I'm sure that the world's oldest democracy will again surprise people the way it surprised in 2016.
I appreciate that. Avinash Kalla with us. a journalist on the move, having covered Indian elections. Now here he is in America, traveling length and breadth of America, driving and meeting people, and we will keep meeting him via Zoom or in some other ways.
Sure.
But I really appreciate your spirit and your commitment, as well as the kind of clarity that you have, which may be little different than mine sometimes.
But we agree to disagree on all shows.
So thanking Avinash for joining us, and thanking all of you for being a part of this interesting and stimulating conversation. This is Ashok Vyas.